Hello and welcome back to the TorontoWebsiteDeveloper.com. I am PD Worski, the Toronto website developer specializing in Drupal. And this is the 6th video tutorial in our 10-part video tutorial series on creating an advanced e-commerce site using Drupal and Ubercart. In the previous video tutorial series, we obviously developed our site, but now we're taking it a step further. And so in the previous video tutorial, we looked at the context module and the delta module on how we could actually alter the output of our site so that we could remove sidebars and that kind of thing, more macro level changes, specifically using those two modules and creating some what are called contexts. So in this video tutorial, I want to dive in a little bit deeper to Drupal's theme system and give you an idea of how we can use that to leverage the power of Drupal. So we're going to spend a couple minutes here on kind of the more theoretical side of what the theme system is, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we're going to pre-process a node and use a template file to specifically alter the layout of our products. So you'll see here, if we wanted to specifically lay these out in a certain way, have a certain look and feel on our site, we can achieve that through preprocess functions and template files. So that's what we're going to look at now. They're pretty powerful concepts. In order to do that, we're going to rely on an existing comment here on Drupal.org, and this is a comment related to the Acquia Prosper theme, which in Drupal 6 had some pre-process for Ubercart, but since hasn't migrated over to Drupal 7 yet. So we're going to specifically use these concepts and incorporate them into our own sub-theme. So the URL for that, if you're curious about this, you want to do a little bit more reading, is right here. I won't read it out to you because it's so long. I'm going to close that window. Now, just for the theoretical side, which we're going to spend a couple minutes on, if you don't want to hear this, go ahead, fast forward. Might make it a little bit confusing a little bit later on in the video tutorial, but I don't think you'll miss too much. Essentially, Drupal's system, like we talked about in the first video tutorial series, is you can think of it in terms of your development and then your themable output. And so the themable output is what we've been working on when we created our new theme. And what it allows you to do is actually control the way that information is conveyed to your end user. So the theme itself has the last say on what actually gets output. So modules do all these work, they pass the information to the theme system, and then you can manipulate it as a themer. Now, in order to do that, there's this hierarchy of functions that end up getting called. And the way they get called and pass information to Drupal is in a specific order, and I'm going to walk you through them. And you'll see in the order that there's some commonalities here. They typically go template, module, theme, template, module, theme. And you'll see that they go from broad to specific. And by that I mean this first template pre-process, it gets called by a module that ends up using a template file, which is a specific file that prints out all the specific information to an end user. So a module would call template preprocess to pass in information to its template files, right? And this end hook is specific. This would get replaced by a specific hook call, so by template preprocess page or node or whatever it is that it defines. This module preprocess allows other modules then to alter the information from the original module calling it. I know it's a little bit confusing, but you can have modules that interact together, right? So Ubercart's a good example because you can have Ubercart, but then you can have other modules that will tie on to Ubercart and do different things, like the coupon module that we looked at. Then lastly, you have called the theme, which allows the theme to alter any of the information that's been already created by, say, the original module or the subsequent altering module. So that's why the theme has the last say on what actually gets output. And this specific call here, theme hook, or preprocess hook gets called, replaced with what you're actually hooking into, right? So we'll be looking at node, we'll be pre-processing node. These last 6 calls on process, are different from pre-process. Essentially what these are like a last chance for you to alter themable output, right? And what I mean by that is in Drupal 6, there used to be the problem where your CSS would be rendered from an array out of these pre-process hooks, right? So you'd have it all passed in, but then there would be no chance to alter that array while it was being built. Drupal just went ahead and did it, and so that caused some headaches for themers. And so what ended up happening in Drupal 7 is these new hooks got introduced, or these new function calls, and they are like your last chance to go ahead and alter that. And the typical case for these are typically I know I'm saying typically a lot, but the typical use for these are for when you're altering CSS just before it's actually output. So that's the idea of those calls. Now, that all said, what we're going to look at is the template.php file, which came with our sub-theme as we developed it out of Omega. And what that does is it allows us to make these calls out of that to alter the output that we're going to actually have. And then we're going to use a template file specifically to our products, and the variables that we create in our template.php, we're going to actually print those out in a template file. So I know that's pretty complex. It's probably way too far down in the weeds, but I wanted you to have an idea of how the theme system worked before we actually went ahead and started working with it. So that said, first thing we're going to do is you're going to head over to drupal.org/project/devel. And this is a great module, short for development. And what this allows us to do is we'll be able to look at the objects and arrays through the theme system to get an idea of what we're actually manipulating. So go ahead, download this, install this on your site. I already have. And when you enable it, I'll show you some functions that we can use to manipulate things. Now, going back to our site, you'll notice that I've automatically turned off the grid and the blocks. I still have them enabled. You might want to go ahead and do that just because it gets ugly when you're working to have those on by default. And we looked at how we did that in the previous video tutorial. Obviously, you just go to Appearance, Settings, and you're going to go to your sub-theme. And then it's in the Debugging tab. You're just going to say Turn Off by Default. Now, that said, I've gone ahead, FTP'd into my site, and I'm into my sub-theme here. This is what I created previously, so if you haven't done that, I suggest you go back and watch the video tutorials first. I've downloaded template.php, so I have that, and I've got my editor up. This is what you're going to have right off the bat. You're going to have template.php and this nice message from Omega. So first thing we're going to do is create a function, and we're going to use exactly what we saw previously when we walked through these. We're going to use theme preprocess node. Except theme is going to be replaced by the actual name of our theme, which I've got to just grab, make sure I get this right. So sub theme brush example, and I'm getting that from my path, my theme, right? That's what I called it in the previous video tutorial. And then preprocess node, and preprocess node takes in by reference a vars variable. And I'll show you just some background information in case you're curious about that. So we go to api.drupal.org/ oh, this is terrible, it was right there. So 7, so we can go to template, preprocess, actually not template, sorry. Theme preprocess node. Yes, so just look for template preprocess, sorry. They're all the same thing. So template preprocess node, search. And so here's the actual, it's defined by the node module, right? So that's what we're using. So that's the actual function signature. Here you'll see I'm using vars, it's using variables. That doesn't matter, you're defining it yourself, so you can go ahead and do that. But what's important is to make sure you have the ampersand there, because that means it's passed in by reference, so we don't have to worry about returning anything, that kind of thing. You will automatically alter the array and it gets passed back into the actual function. And then there's some examples here that you can actually walk through and some comments. So more information there if you're interested in that. But going back to our actual editor, we're going to go ahead and do this. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to go kpr vars. Remember, I mentioned Devel provides us with some nice functions. KPR is one of those, and we'll see what that actually does here. So I've got to obviously upload this, so we'll go ahead and do that. Now, first thing you're going to have to do is flush your caches, and the reason why we do that is because we've created a new function for the theme system, and every function is cached in Drupal for the theme system. So Drupal won't know about this unless you clear your caches. So that's why we're doing that. Now you'll see we get these two lines here, which you can actually click on. And the reason why we're getting two is because we have two nodes. We have the Super Saver node listed here. We have Pete's Awesome Product. So why don't we step into Pete's Awesome Product, and then we can specifically just work with that. Now I've got this array, and so what this array is our actual node object. So all of the information that's associated with the node, we can see it all right here, right? And we've got some interesting information, obviously, because we're looking at a product. We have a sell price, a cost price, that kind of thing. Just wanted to flag that for you. We're not actually going to be using that or altering that. What we're going to scroll down to is content. And so this content variable is passed into the node template file, which we're going to be actually customizing. And so this is what we're going to be actually manipulating. And so if you're following along and you've created other fields for your product, you want to make sure that you're going to capture all of the content fields that you have in here. And I'll show you what I mean when I say that. So that said, what I'm going to do is, because I'm creating my own template file, I'm going to go back and grab I'll show you first here. If I go into templates, this is where you put yours. You don't have any in here. And there's a README file which tells you, place yours in there, that kind of thing. So if we go over to Omega, and we go into Omega, we go into templates, you'll see Omega provides us with a bunch of defaults here, right? And so I can go ahead and I can grab this node template. And just to take a brief sidestep, the theme system, what it does is, just like the function calls for these template files, it works its way down to the more specific, right? So you see that node module that comes with Drupal core provides the node.tpl.php file, right? So Drupal will look for that first. Then it will look into the base theme, and so base themes provides node.tpl.php. So rather than use the node module, it uses the node base theme. Then it looks into our theme. We didn't have node.tpl.php, so it didn't use that. It just relied on the base theme. We're going to now add a different file, but it would, if we added node.tpl.php to our specific sub theme, it would then use that file. Again, I know that's complex. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So going back to Dress Omega theme, we've got templates. Rather than upload node.tpl.php, I'm going to specify this just so it hits our product content types. And the reason why I do that is because if we just uploaded node.tpl.php, that would hit every node type that we have. So we have a page node type, we have a product kit node type, we have a product node type. All of those would be affected by node.tpl.php. Again, remember, Drupal works its way down more specific. So the I guess the way that you change these and you make them more specific is you add a dash dash and then whatever your content type is. So mine is, and what I expect yours to be would be dash dash product.tpl.php. And this will hit all product content types. It won't hit product kit content types because those are specifically different. And we know they're different because if we look at structure content types, I've got product, product kit, obviously two different ones, right? So now that I've got product, what I can do is this will just have the exact same look and feel of the node because that's what I've gone ahead and copied. So what I'm going to do is, just to make sure this is working, I'm going to open in my editor, and as a first line, I'm just going to go PHP print hello world. And what this will allow me to do is it'll make sure that I've actually overridden the specific node for my product content type. So again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to upload this. I'm going to go back. I've got to flush my caches again because I've introduced a new file to the theme system. So we'll flush theme. Right, and now I can see this line, hello world. So I'm using my node override. And if I go back to the home page, remember, I'm not seeing, or I am seeing hello world on both. So actually, no. So I did lie to you. So that should be okay. Let's make sure that what we're actually looking at other content types. Got a basic page, so we can go to Peter's Awesome. And you'll see that I'm not seeing my specific override here. On Peter's Awesome, it's a basic page, so obviously my my node product template file is just hitting the one, or rather the product and product kit. So you can ignore what I said before. Obviously this is going to work for both, so that's good. That's a good test dummy. So we'll go back into Pete's Awesome product. And remember I said we were going to look at the content, so I'm going to scroll down and check out the content array. And now I know I've got these actual variables that I want to go ahead and I want to pre-process. And what I'd like to do is make them a little bit easier so that I can go in and I can edit my template file and just print these out in a specific order that I like. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So I'm just going to move my editor over here, and in template.php, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab some code and I'll walk you through this. I'm going to print it out. I've already done this ahead of time to save you a little bit of trouble. And by trouble I mean time. So I'll just go ahead and I'll paste this. And so let's walk through what this actually does here. So the first line, if module exists, what I want to do is I only want to pre-process this node if this module exists, right? And that module is UC product. So that's the module that comes with Drupal, or rather Ubercart, specifically for products. And then the other thing I want to do is Ubercart comes with a nice function which tells you whether or not you're looking at a node, or sorry, a product. So UC product is product. You hand in the node variable, or rather your node, and it will tell you true or false whether or not it's a product. And so this makes sure that we won't actually be doing all of these pre-processing of other nodes that don't actually have this content. Now, I've created a bunch of these variables, right? I've got vars and then a name and then equals Drupal render. So you might be scratching your head and thinking, what the hell does that mean? Drupal render is a function out of Drupal which allows you to take an array into output, HTML output. And so what I'm doing here is I'm creating these easy to use variables, UC body, image, module, display price, and rendering the output so that it gets passed into the template file just as a nice specific variable, UC body, UC image, UC model. Easy for me to manipulate and print out. Right, so that's what all of this is doing. And all of these variables correspond with actual information that's being provided in the content. Now you'll notice that I've got other arrays in the content array that I'm not specifically using. Example being meta tags, links, comments, and that's fine. We can still accommodate that. I'll show you how we do that in the template file. Essentially what Drupal allows us to do is we can render things, we can hide them from rendering, and then we can do a whole bunch of rendering, and then whatever's left, we can render that out at the end. So that's the type of system that we're going to be using. So that all said, all of these variables correspond here. So I've got my body, I've got my image, I've got my list price, and then they're being passed into my template file. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this template.php, and actually what I'm going to do before I do that is I'm going to KPR vars again, right? And I'll do it at the top, and the reason why I'm doing 2 here is because I want to give you an idea of what this looks like before and after. Oops. Let's go ahead and save that. So I've got to upload this again. So I'm uploading my template.php. And I don't have to clear my caches because it's not a new function call. Drupal already knows about this function. I've just changed the content in the function, so we'll still call it and we're still good to go. And you'll notice here I used to have 79 elements in the array, now I've got 89, and that's indicative of the fact that I've created a whole bunch of variables and added them to the variables array that we were looking at. And so if I scroll down here, you'll see I've got all of these UC body, image, model, and that kind of stuff, and it's actually HTML that's been created. So I've got this div class, and it's all spit out. So when I print that, that's going to get printed in my template file, and it'll automatically be created. So that's kind of good. So that said, so now if I go up to content, I've still got all my content stuff here. I've got my model, you'll see that it's here, I've got my body. That's because I didn't actually change the content variable, right? I just went ahead and used the information that was there and I rendered it. And then what ends up happening is, if I go into content, let's go an example here of model, printed is true. But if I look at comments, it doesn't have printed as true. So Drupal is keeping track of what's been printed, what's been rendered, and so it won't render it twice. Now, to me, that's awesome, and it's something that really helps out. And you'll see what I mean when we actually use our template.php file. Or sorry, not template.php, no, product.tpl.php. So let's get rid of these KPRs because we don't need them now. We know that we're good to go. We have our variables, so we'll save that. And before we forget, we'll upload template.php back. And now we're going to take a look at our node product page, right? So we can get rid of our hello world. We know that's working, so we'll go ahead and save that. Make sure we do that. And remember when I talked about render and hide? Here, what Omega is doing is it's hiding the comments and it's hiding the links. It's rendering all the content, and then it's going to print them later. And when it renders the content, because it's got printed true on the variables, or rather the arrays that it's already printed, it doesn't duplicate things. So that's why that's kind of neat and powerful. Now, again, I'm going to grab a whole bunch of content and I'm going to walk you through it so that you get an idea of what I'm doing here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste over everything, and you'll see that I've added a whole bunch of code. And so my code starts right here under content attributes. And I guess what I should do is, no, that's fine. So first thing that I've done is I've added the product type. And so this was added in. We created it from template.php, right? And this is specific to my site. This is not an Ubercart field. This was the actual taxonomy term that I created. And so you'll see that I've rendered that field product type. That's what I created into a variable. And what I'm doing is, and this, oh, looks like I've created some dumb stuff here. This body should be here. This image should be here. And this type should be here. So I'm just going to save that. So essentially what this is doing is it's looking at, is this type, is there an actual value in this variable? If there is, print it out. If not, don't print anything. Next I have my images. Is there an actual image for this product? If there is, print it out. If there isn't, print nothing. Then I've got body, right? That's the actual description of the product. Print that out. So those three are going to print out in their own divs. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to print all the product details together in their own div. And so we'll see here that I've got a first specific variable that's just saying, if any of these exist, then create all of these divs and do all of this stuff. If they don't exist, then don't do any of that. So that's what this is specifically pertaining to. And you can always pause this video and grab this code. And this should be back up. So again, what I'm looking at here, created a field group. All of these things are grouped together in a div. And what this does is, if the UC weight variable exists, if I've added a weight to the product, go ahead and print it out. Same for dimensions, model, list price, sell price, cost. And then moving down here, display price, add to cart. If both of them exist, go ahead and do that. Now I've done all of that, but I didn't actually render all of the content, right? We didn't manipulate all the content. We looked at certain variables in the content variable out of template.php. And so content is still a variable that's available to my template file to render everything else. Now before I go ahead and do that, I want to hide the comments, I want to hide the links, just so that all of the other content that maybe I didn't pre-process and already print gets output. So I'm not missing anything, right? I've got all my variables, everything that's left over, and then I'm hiding two things. So that gets printed out, my remaining content. And then lastly, at the very bottom, if my links aren't empty, I'm going to go ahead and print those. And if my comments are there, I'm going to go ahead and render those. So that's where render comment is. So let's go ahead and save this. And now I'm going to go to my templates folder. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to upload this new file. And again, I don't need to clear any of my caches because it's already a function that Drupal's aware of. I just reload my page. And now if I scroll up, you'll see I've got my product type rendered first. I've got my image. I've got this. I've got my description right after the image, and then I've got this block of specific attributes that I had put together, and then I've got my add to cart along with my price, and then I've got my comments that are being rendered after, right? And there's my first comment that I've created as a test. So that's the theme system, how we can manipulate it. That's a good example of typical theming that you're going to end up doing, where you're going to use a preprocess function, change some things up, pass them into a template file, and then use that template file to render output. The reason why you have a function in a template file is because the template files typically, Drupal's, I don't want to say best case scenario, but the Drupal principles are use your template files just to output, keep all of your logic into the template.php file. And there are obviously some examples of that, like if statements and that kind of thing. You'll sometimes see those in template files just like I use them, but for the most part it's just rendering output. All of your logic is actually in template.php. So that's it for this video tutorial. In the next tutorial we'll start taking a look at CSS and how we can make this look pretty, because obviously this is ugly. It's just a line of content straight down, but what we've done is set up the backbone that we can actually manipulate in the next video tutorial with the less framework, which is going to be pretty cool, pretty exciting from my view. So again, if this video tutorial helped you, please leave a comment, let me know. Thumbs up are always appreciated, and if you subscribe to the to my channel, you'll obviously won't miss any of these, and so hopefully we'll see you in the next video tutorial. Thanks very much for watching.